Right, so the list of independent candidates taking on Keir Starmer and his Labour candidates is growing ever more. The latest being former South African ANC politician Andrew Feinstein, having been selected by the independent grouping offe to stand against Keir Starmer himself as their candidate. As Labour continue to show they are nothing more than Red Tories, we need alternatives to that on offer, and so they are appearing. We're sick of the Tories. We're sick of their politics. Labour is supposed to be different. But under Starmer, it has been utterly undone and destroyed as an opposition to that. So slowly, gradually, independent candidates opposed to all of that, standing for the stuff Labour should be as a truly left-wing socialist democratic party, are appearing. The Observer have described this as a wave of independent candidates. So it's the way of party politics, having ultimately failed to represent us for years and years now, falling by the wayside, and our voters becoming more attracted to individuals who will put them in their areas first, rather than party politicians only interested in furthering their own careers. Right, so brilliant news this morning, following on from my video yesterday, that Andrew Feinstein has indeed been selected as the offe candidate, the independent offe-sponsored candidate. Offe are not a party. He is truly going to stand as an independent, to stand against Keir Starmer in Holborn and St Pancras, winning the nomination by a colossal 95%. As a former ANC politician, as someone who worked in economics and finance as part of that ANC government in South Africa, as someone who is a lifelong opponent of the global arms trade and an opponent of apartheid, he represents everything that Keir Starmer is not. But not only that, being a resident of Holborn and St Pancras now, as he is and has been for some years, he recognises the issues of the people there, and this is another front where Starmer falls short, as if we need to be told about another one where he falls short, regarded as a terrible local MP as he is, not interested in where he lives, only fixated in getting into number 10. He's the sort of MP that takes no interest in local campaigns, never answers emails from constituents, the pro-NHS privatisation Starmer refusing to engage, for example, with a local campaign to even save primary healthcare provision. Large numbers of his own constituents don't even know he's the leader of the opposition. That's how bad he is, how disinterested in ordinary lives he is. So little wonder his party is run as is it? Little wonder so many people, not just in Holborn and St Pancras, can't stand him, but feel the same nationwide. So in that vein, is it little wonder people are organising in pockets around the country to stand candidates of their own and are funding them to do just that? You see, that's the ultimate barrier to independents standing and succeeding at national level. The cost is obscene. The Tories are already trying to stack the cards in their own favour ahead of the next election because they have more money than anyone else. They have the bigger donors, don't they? By raising the election spending cap by 80% to around £35 million nationally, that if spent evenly works out at nearly £54,000 of spending per seat, how can ordinary people possibly compete with that? Organisation, obviously, turns out to be the answer. Offe have had a crowdfunder going for months. They are, at time of writing, have reached nearly just past £13,000 for Feinstein. Now, and obviously, we'll be looking for further donations, and such is the case for other independents too, that have sprung up because they've come about as part of local movements, local voters getting together, sick of their poor representation in Parliament and an electoral system that seems to mean they can't shift the incumbent. Raising funds, raising awareness, bringing more people on board as a local movement for local people, and selecting someone from amongst their own ranks to stand. There are numerous examples now, up and down the country. I've spoken of Ilford North before and their candidate Leanne Mohammed. They have Wes Streeting as their MP, pro-Israel, pro-Starmer, locally invisible as well, a total careerist seemingly bent on further NHS privatisation. And in response to his awful pro-Israel stance, there have been protests outside his constituency office, organised, again, by local people, coming together to oppose what he represents and what he stands for. And in this case, it is the Red Bridge Community Action Group. Again, they are raising funds set on combating what Streeting stands for, which is whatever Starmer does, joined at the hip as they seem to be, and standing a young British Palestinian woman against him, again, in and of itself, sends a message. Shows beyond doubt in what way she is opposed to Streeting, but equally is campaigning on a platform of a fully renationalised and funded NHS, again in stark contrast too. She's also from Ilford North, unlike Streeting, who's from Stepney. And the whole point of a local MP elected by local people from amongst themselves, cutting out the whole political party frame, means if they were to win, still a challenge, They'd be completely beholden to those same local people to serve their needs, for them to support them to defend the seat in future. No longer would big party political capital or lobbying from vested interests work, if you think about it. In Bethnal Green and Bow, I've spoken about the protests at Labour MP Rushanara Ali in previous videos, as she abstained on a ceasefire vote, despite having a massive Muslim population in her constituency. Now local lawyer Tasneem Akunji is standing to challenge her, and his support in his candidacy is coming from the influence of that large local Muslim population, plus the additional support that will come from Muslim candidates via the new, far more national but still grassroots movement that's sprung up called the Muslim Vote. Ali's reputation locally is in pieces off the back of Labour's Gaza stance. That won't shift, as beholden to the Zionist lobby as the party is. So for Muslims to get the representation in Parliament that they deserve and want, they need to put forward their own people. Now this all seems very nice and very London-centric so far, Damo and fair dues these examples are. Arguably London Labour MPs, I suppose, have caused more anger, or you can also argue that London is particularly multicultural and diverse, but not exclusively so. People are angry, and there are multicultural areas across this country, of course there are. Up in the northwest, let's go up there, the Liverpool Community Independents, they came into being off the back of awful local Labour representation in Liverpool. And they are putting on one of their own number forward to challenge Labour MP Maria Eagle in the newly created seat of Garston, created due to the boundary changes that are coming in. Locally, their candidate, Sam Gorst, great guy, great socialist, formerly Labour, but left as part of a group that became the Liverpool Community Independents, defended his seat on Liverpool City Council successfully in Garston against Labour, and now they seek to up the ante and take out the Labour MP there as well. And who would doubt their ability to do that? Like so many of the people involved in these independent campaigns around the country, they are people driven away from Labour, disgusted by what Starmer has done to the party, the actions he's putting in place, the diktat he's instigating, the organisers, the campaigners, the experience he's lost as a result of that, will now all be deployed against him, all getting around local representation for local people and the issues that matter in their constituencies. But as the Liverpool Community Independents showed, it doesn't just have to be at that top national level that this is done. They, after all, began at local level. And although it is these big general election cases that make the news, it's happening nationwide at local level as well. The last set of local elections were bad for the Tories, but they were also poor for Labour, when really there was no excuses for that, being out of power for as long as they have. Their gains were outweighed by losses that were completely avoidable, as people turned, yes, notably to the Green Party, who did astonishingly well, but also to independent candidates too, who are always far more prevalent at local level. The Morning Star reported at the beginning of this month that ex-Labour councillors are assembling on the 2nd of March at a literal conference to plan electoral opposition across the country to the Labour Party, particularly in light of their ongoing warmongering pro-Israel stance, which we know will not shift. It's pretty much the only thing Starmer is guaranteed not to U-turn over, because he owes too much to the lobby. Bought and paid for in a way, as I've said already, that a truly local independent candidate never could be, because they'd lose their funding in future to stand again if they did, reliant on local people to fund their campaigns. The conference is going to be called No Ceasefire, No Vote. It is primarily aimed at MPs going into the general election, but with local elections coming up soon again, that forms part of their agenda as well. It'll be a very interesting set of local elections this year, I fancy, because I can quite conceivably see Labour right now losing seats like the Tories undoubtedly will. Both main parties having a nightmare, and Tories completely done for as they are also, utterly deservedly. But equally, there is still so much scope for independents to step up and challenge in more seats in more areas if they can get organised. Time, of course, is running out. There's going to be a general election this year at some point. The Muslim Vote organisation is there to facilitate this in many areas, but it doesn't have to just be down to them. It doesn't have to be just down to Muslim voters across the country, wherever they are. An example of where a campaign I think could be mounted quite successfully would be Leeds West, the seat of Keir Starmer's Chancellor of a Chancellor, the George Osborne austerity wannabe, Rachel Reeves. Now, she has a majority not much bigger than that which Labour currently hold in Rochdale, a seat they look set on losing her right now. There's a Muslim population in Leeds West, not a huge one, but not insignificant either. They will no doubt be furious with their MP as well. But right now, Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules mean voters can only look forward to more Tory economics should Labour win the general election. The bigger issue in her constituency, I feel, since she'd be in charge of the nation's purse strings, is poverty. And that's certainly a platform somebody could successfully campaign on. Let's have a look at child poverty just as one aspect of this. The UK rate of relative child poverty sits right now at 20.1%, according to the government's latest figures. In Reeves' seat of Leeds West, it's 24.6%, so nearly 1 in 4 kids living in her own constituency is in relative poverty, which is defined as living in a household where the income is below 60% of average, so living on close to half what the average household takes in. That equates to an annual income of £19,380. Now let's look at absolute child poverty. That is defined as living in a household where the income is below 60% of the average income back in 2011, which is a very strange way of measuring it. We don't just measure it as a percentage against current levels. That's probably because we would be shocked and appalled. It is shocking and appalling because I did the maths. And this is equal to an annual income here and now of just £12,180. Can you get by on roughly £1,000 a month? Well, the average UK rate of absolute poverty, that income rate, is 15.3%. That's appallingly high for such a horrendous rate of child poverty. But in Reeves' Leeds West seat, it's 18.7%. Nearly 1 in 5 kids. She's going to become Chancellor of the Exchequer, knowing the stats, knowing what it is like amongst her own constituents, and she, instead of doing what is needed to fix this, is instead saying we can't afford to, that we can't tax wealth either, that bankers should keep their bonuses too. It's food for thought for anyone thinking of standing against her, isn't it? But this is just one example. Independent standing is one thing, but the party politics landscape of our government can only be broken with people getting behind them and voting for them. So for anyone saying they've got no choice or there's nobody for them on the ballot, well, perhaps it should be you then. Anyway, it would be remiss of me to not offer a big congratulations to Andrew Feinstein for getting selected to stand against Keir Starmer, and do support his campaign now if you can by helping out with that crowdfunder. It's on crowdfunder.co.uk. It's called Starmer Out, Beat Starmer in Holborn and St Pancras. You can find out a lot more about Andrew in this video just here. The word is Starmer's team are absolutely raging that he's been selected because, frankly, he terrifies them. They're afraid Starmer could end up being Jo Swinson. Remember her? And they're right to be concerned, frankly, with the likely way this country is set to be run following the general election. Seeing Starmer fall could be one of the biggest highlights of it. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.